You need the Export-Import Functional Setup User role and the appropriate Application Administrator role to perform this activity. Before you can import, you must first export your offering as described in the Export Offering tutorial. To start, open the Offering Setup page. In this example, you've successfully exported the setup data for supply chain planning, and now you're ready to import it to another environment. If you export setup data of an entire offering, start the import process from the offering. Create a new import process. Open the configuration package file that contains the exported setup data that you want to import. The Configuration Package Details section displays the basic information about the selected setup data file, so you can verify that you've selected the correct file. If you need to, you can select a different file. By default, the import process will pause if any errors are found during import, so you can take the corrective actions before it continues. If you want, you can change this option and allow the process to run without pausing. However, be aware that if any prerequisite data fails, additional dependent data might not be imported correctly. There might be some data that can't be imported automatically and will require you to import it manually. By default, the import process pauses each time data must be imported manually. You can change this option if all data required to be imported manually already exists in your environment. Although feature selection, that is, the opt-in configuration, is exported with the setup data, it's not automatically imported. If you want to import opt-in configuration, you must select the Import Feature Selection checkbox before you submit. After you've made all your selections, submit the process. Open the Import Offering History page to monitor the process until it completes. If any setup of the offerings requires you to manually enter data before import can start, and you didn't change the default import options, the status changes to User Action Required. The tasks you must perform before resuming the import process are listed in the Pre-Import Tasks section. These are the same manual tasks you received a warning about at the end of the export processing. Click the task to open the page and enter the data. After you complete the data entry, return to the Import Process page and continue with the next task until all tasks are completed. After you've entered the required setup data, resume the import process. Confirm that you want to continue with the same options to pause the process. You can change them if needed. The import process resumes. You can click Refresh to view the latest status or click the status for more details. The Summary panel displays details about the process, including the current status. Again, you can click Refresh to view the latest status. The process will pause again if you need to enter additional setup data for any other task. Repeat the same steps as before to enter the data and resume the process. After the process is complete, review the results. Confirm if there are any additional manual tasks you need to complete after the import. If so, make sure you perform them correctly, or the offering will not fully be ready to be used. If the import process completes with errors, the Status Details column in the Business Objects section will display the error details. Review the errors and take appropriate action to correct them. You can also search for a status. Since this process completed successfully, you do not need to perform any additional actions. However, it's a best practice to verify that the correct data was imported for the setup objects before making the offering available to users. To do this, check each task or run a comparison process to ensure the configurations match. If you exported setup data of a functional area instead of an entire offering, start the import process from the functional area. For example, after your initial import of the entire offering, if you need to migrate setup changes for supply chain planning configuration, you could export only that functional area. In that case, select Supply Chain Planning Configuration from the list of functional areas, and then create a new import process. The rest of the import process works the same for both the offering and the functional areas. Thanks for watching.